Welcome, everyone. My name is Roxanne Shirazi. I'm the Dissertation Research Librarian, and this is a dissertation and thesis deposit information session for the Graduate Center. So, to get started, I do like to begin with just going over why the library comes in at this point anyway. This is sort of what is the deposit. And it's important to just remember that the dissertation or thesis is intended to advance a field. So it's intended to be a scholarly contribution that advances a field of knowledge. And depositing it with the library is how that happens. So we will preserve it and we allow researchers to access it. And I focus on this simply to make clear, especially to the master's students, sometimes we're accustomed to simply having it be a paper between you and your advisor, or even for doctoral students, you've been working with your committee very insularly. But this is the moment where we are helping to prepare it, taking it from that kind of more private paper into something for the rest of the world, right, as a contribution to the research landscape. So library deposit is actually a degree requirement for doctoral students. It's the last degree requirement. It is also a degree requirement for most master's students at the Grad Center. Not all. Some programs do not require a deposit to finish. That is determined when the degree gets approved by the state. It's part of the curricular requirements. So if you're not sure whether you should be here, we do have that information on the website. But it's just good to know that in addition to preparing your document and going through these citation questions and all of the format questions that we'll go through, it's actually a degree requirement because it is preparing it into that research contribution, right? Taking it to that next step. What we do is process the library deposit to fulfill the degree requirement. We also maintain format guidelines and inspect all of the submissions for compliance with those format guidelines. We also provide guidance on copyright and plagiarism concerns and other questions that have to do with manuscript preparation, sometimes technology troubleshooting, sometimes permissions, publication agreements, that sort of thing. So a lot of that, this also is what we're going to cover tonight. So the steps to depositing here. The first thing you need to do, as soon as you imagine that you're getting close to graduating, right? You're starting to look at dates, you're starting to get to the end. The first thing you should do is apply for graduation in CUNY first. That is in some ways a formality, but it is important. So it's less of an application that you get approved for, and it is more clicking some screens in CUNY first. It will flag you as somebody who's looking to file for a degree. So that must be done 2 weeks before deposit. The next thing that you can do is clear any holds. Once you indicate in CUNY first that you are getting ready to graduate, all of the administrative offices at the Grad Center will look at your information and see if anything's missing. So it's also offices that you might owe money to. The bursar looks at it, library, when we used to have fines for overdue books or something like that. So when you apply for graduation, after that, you may see that there's a hold on your account from some office. You would then need to go and clear that hold. There are also surveys. For the doctoral students, you can complete the National Science Foundation's Survey of Earned Doctorates. That's an annual census of people who have earned doctoral degrees. It's been conducted since 1957, so it's like the real US Census. A more complete count is more useful. It's one of the best sort of data sources for people who are advancing in doctoral education. There is, for master's students, the Graduate Center Exit Questionnaire, and both of those are listed on the library's website. Next, you would review the library's format guidelines, and we'll go into lots of detail about that tonight. Then you would decide that you formatted it well, you're ready to upload. So you would upload the approved, committee approved, or advisor approved PDF. All graduates will submit to something called CUNY Academic Works. This is CUNY's digital repository. It's our local home for your PDF. It lives on the internet though. But the reason why I emphasize that it's local is that it is not fully integrated into a lot of the more proprietary research databases that scholars will use. So to get your information in those databases, we also require doctoral students only have to submit to ProQuest's ETD administrator. What that does is submit your dissertation to ProQuest's Digital Dissertations Database. That's a database that aggregates dissertations from all institutions globally. ProQuest took over this mantle from UMI. I mean, dissertation abstracts, it's the, again, complete data source for dissertations. After that, you would then request department approval, be sent to the library. So, and actually, have a little thing here. These steps up at the top can all be done before your defense, before the advisor's approval, or if you're waiting for comments, waiting for feedback. Sometimes students ask me, you know, how could they get started early because they have time now, right? These are things you can do early. The last two bullet points on this slide, the uploading and the department approval, those can be done in any order. You don't have to wait until the department has told the library that you're ready to deposit in order to deposit. If I get a submission and I don't have an approval on file, I'll check in with the program office to say, wait a minute, this person submitted a thesis, are they done? And vice versa. So if you're trying to get a hold of your advisor or can't get information back from your executive officer in time, like you don't need to wait, go ahead and submit as long as you know that it's the final approved version and it's all been signed off on. You can go ahead and submit it so we can begin the format review. All right, so deadlines, which are everyone's favorite topic. The deadline for deposit, what that means is that by the end of the day, on the day of the deadline, you must have submitted a dissertation, thesis, or capstone project. So that means uploading your files to the library. And we must have some sort of approval on file from the program's executive officer. So on that last day, it's fine to submit on the last day. You can wait and do it the last day, but we won't be able to provide immediate feedback about the format. So think of that deadline as the last day to submit to the library. It will still take 2 to 3 business days for us to confirm the deposit. So you might be a little anxious because it's last minute. It's always better to not wait until the last day, but it is possible. So I like to make sure everyone's aware of that. The graduation dates and deadlines are posted on the library's website. You'll see here for each degree date, there are 3 degree dates each academic year at the Graduate Center. So we're looking here primarily at February degree date. You'll see that the last semester enrolled, what that means is, yes, that's the last semester you're going to enroll. You must be enrolled. So for doctoral students, if you have taken a leave of absence, you cannot come right back and deposit your dissertation. You do need to have an active enrollment in the fall semester in order to file for a February degree. So those deadlines are posted on the library's website for convenience. It is officially listed in the campus academic calendar that's put out by the registrar. And also students should check with their programs about deadlines that may be required in addition to these. I know that the Master's in Liberal Studies program actually has a couple of weeks before that. They require you to submit your materials to that office. So please be aware, again, when you're working with your advisors or your committee, right, a lot of it is accommodating their timeline. So make sure if you're planning out your dates now, that you know that you must complete deposit with the library by January 28th in order to file for a February degree. If you don't make that deadline, the day that is the last day to deposit is also the last day to change your enrollment without fees or some such. There's some alignment that the registrar has, so that if you don't deposit, you need to enroll in the spring. If you're not sure whether you're going to meet the deadline, usually we advise students to go ahead and register for spring, because if you do make the deadline and deposit for a February degree, the registrar will automatically cancel your enrollment. So it's better, if you think about it, it's better to have that kind of option, and then it's just canceled when you do deposit, rather than something happens, some kind of emergency happens, you get delayed, and then you're scrambling to try and fix your enrollment issues, because you're going to file for spring. So. All right, so now I'm going to show you some of the how to do these things. Applying for graduation in CUNY first is, as I said, it's just clicking through. You'll go into the My Academics section. You might have multiple degrees listed there. Maybe your MPhil or something is on there. You need to find the one that you're filing for and then click on Apply for Graduation. It's really, again, just click through screens, and nobody will get back to you and say, yes, everything's fine, right? There's no real response other than an email with information about how to deposit at the library. But just the next time you log in after you've applied for graduation, this item here will say applied instead of an action apply for. All right, so clearing holds, completing surveys. I went over this a little bit about the survey of earned doctorates. That, again, it's a very detailed survey, so it asks a lot of questions. But again, it's a really, really useful data source for anyone studying higher education, especially researchers who are interested in who is obtaining doctoral degrees. So I really encourage everyone to fill this out if you can. Asks, again, a lot of information, but it is, I think, especially important for CUNY students to be represented in that data set. All right, and again, everything is aggregated and kept confidential. This is the bulk of the presentation because everyone wants to know about format guidelines. So the format guidelines are on the library's website. I'm sure you've seen them. You've registered for this. There's also a format checklist that goes in detail with the most common changes that need to be made when students submit their work. In fact, this checklist comes from our sort of review checklist, right? These are the things we're looking at because they're the most common things to fix. So if you go through our format checklist, which is posted on the library's format page of the Dissertation Office website, then you will be in good shape if you've addressed everything on this checklist. The Graduate Center format guidelines are intended to really standardize the submissions across all of the different disciplines that we have here in our degree programs at the Grad Center. Once we get into the meat of the submission, like the inside of the dissertation, they're going to look very, very different. Comparative lit, chemistry, physics. I mean, there's all different writing conventions, ways of presenting your research. We want that to remain so that you look like you know what you're doing in that discipline. But to standardize it, we require you to insert a set of preliminary pages at the front that are very precisely ordered, very carefully formatted so that it's in line with saying, this is the Graduate Center dissertation style. It's the same requirement for theses, and capstone projects will also cover a little. So generally, we're not going to check the citation format. Like, we're not copy editing the manuscript. We are looking for consistency, for legibility is one of the most important, to make sure that nothing's off the page, or if somebody tries to print something. Dissertations are still microfilmed, surprisingly, and so some of our requirements have to do with that. We want to make sure that the document is navigable, that you don't have page numbers restarting in the middle, all of these things when you're writing a major project on the screen. These are the things we're checking for to make sure that it's prepared for an outside audience. Again, not copy editing, not proofreading. Any errors will remain, so check that part separately. The page sequence for the manuscript is important, and it may vary from your disciplinary style, especially those of you writing an APA, which indicates that appendices should follow the references. Our style differs, so that is an area where you don't defer to the disciplinary style. We do require bibliography, references, works cited, whatever it's called in your field. We require that to be the very last section of the document. So any appendices, if you've grouped your tables and figures together, they all need to appear before. Illustrations as well. Nothing should just be tacked at the end. All right, so now really to drill down into the format here, here's a picture of a title page. it should have only the information that's on there. We are less concerned with the inches separating these sections. You know, you won't find any instructions saying that the title must appear 3 inches from the top or something like that. We really just want there to be this information. So the title by author, there should be no degrees or honorifics listed. That's just the convention that we have at the Graduate Center. It's just your name. And then the statement at the bottom, a dissertation submitted to the graduate faculty in program, here it's English, in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, the City University of New York. Note, it does not say the Graduate Center. It doesn't have the Graduate Center, it doesn't say John Jay, criminal justice, right? It just says the graduate faculty in that program for the requirements of the degree in the City University of New York. And I'll also point out for master's students in the liberal studies program, make sure that you're saying graduate faculty in liberal studies, not in MALS, right? So it's graduate faculty in liberal studies in partial fulfillment of the requirements for Master of Arts. And you'll see again at the beginning, it says a master's thesis. All of these pages I'm going to show you are based on the sample pages that are available on the library's website. And we also, I can provide links. It's always a good idea to look at past dissertations from your program to see how other students solved issues if you're running into any questions about how to organize your material. I should actually, before this, let me just point out, which I didn't on the title page, for February grads, the title page must say 2022, even if you're submitting yesterday. So if you submit in 2021, that's not what's important. If you wrote it in 2021, that's not. The year on the title page is for the degree date. So write 2022. If you want to keep 2021 somewhere in there because you feel like, you know, it's misleading or I don't know, people have reasons, you can keep 2021 in the copyright statement. So the next page after the title page is this copyright statement. Notice that all of these preliminary pages that the library is requiring you to insert are numbered with lowercase Roman numerals. Dissertations and theses, by extension, are pretending to be books. They're styled as though it's a scholarly monograph. So we're the format for these preliminary pages is based on the Turabian Chicago style. So you'll see all of these sort of prefatory pages have lowercase Roman numeral page numbers. And if you're not sure how to do that, it is on the library website. We give an instruction to Word on our site on how to do that. So this page here is not actually copyrighting the work. It is indicating who holds the copyright to the work, and that is going to be you. So students do retain copyright to the dissertation, thesis, capstone. Nothing in that sense is transferred to the university. What's happening on this page, because copyright is automatic right now under US copyright law, you are automatically the copyright holder until you transfer that to someone else. This statement here is really just to indicate that it's the author who's the copyright holder. We use it as an indication of who does hold the copyright. It's not a work for hire for CUNY or the Graduate Center, right? It's yours. Students who are interested in applying a Creative Commons license can do so here. Instead of saying all rights reserved, you would be saying some rights reserved and applying whatever license is in there. You all are still seeing this screen, right? Just want to make sure. Yeah, following? Everything's good? Okay. It's tough without a real audience here. Okay, next, page numbers. Page numbers can be anywhere on the page, but they must be consistently applied. So it's not a concern whether you put them in the lower right or lower middle or upper right, upper, well, I don't know that I've ever seen upper middle, but in any event, they can be wherever you like. What's important is that the preliminary pages are lowercase Roman numerals and that you are consistent. The third page, so you note that the previous page had the page number at the bottom, this one has it at the top. This is a sample that's indicating the manuscript statement that appears on page 3. Page 3 is the approval page. In the days of print dissertations, I should have mentioned actually that the dissertations are no longer bound and shelved in the library. The only version that we're retaining is the PDF. However, so I'll go back. In the old days when we did have print, this page was created and the signatures would appear in the bound copy. This was kind of the signed cover page. It was part of the only copy of the dissertation or thesis. Once we moved to having PDF versions, online in ProQuest in the early 2000s, the university didn't really want signatures just floating around. So the PDF version does not have signatures, but we retain the page because it's sort of a credit sheet. It's the only place that's officially listing, the information about your degree, your supervisory committee, the executive officer of the program when you're enrolled and such. So this statement here should appear, and it should have the same information that was in the title page with the program and the degree as well. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's on the website. So make sure you check that part. The abstract here is the fourth page. So again, for every dissertation or thesis, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The abstract page here has the title, your name, and then the advisor at the top. There is no limit to the length of the abstract anymore. There used to be when we had to publish dissertation abstracts in print. Now there's no limit. It can go as long as you want. The acknowledgements page is optional. So this is the point where the pagination can vary depending on the submission. Most students do include an acknowledgement. I would say it's very rare for there to be nothing there. But what I want to point out is that it serves several purposes. It is indicating, I think everyone thinks of it as just being a thank you to my committee, to my family, to this, and that's true. But you want to give credit to anyone who provided material support for your research. It's also the place where you would indicate any prior publication, any permissions. It is another place to credit the research or people who supported the research. So I have some examples here. This one it's probably too small for you to see, but in the beginning, it's thank you to my advisor and this and that. And then there's another paragraph that talks about their funding sources. They received this fellowship and this and that. And then here at the end, you see indication of prior publication, right? So portions of, or it says the Cunard section of chapter 3 was first published in the Massachusetts Review. We'll get into that later about reusing your own publications, but in the event that you do reuse your own publications, or you have received permission from someone to reproduce material, or you have gotten amazing access to somebody's personal archives, right, or whatever it may be, you would put it in the acknowledgement section. So it's more than personal thanks. It's really a place to provide a lot of credit. Next is the table of contents. That can be as simple or as detailed as you like. You should follow your disciplinary conventions here. This is a very simple one. It's a thesis. It only, the whole text goes to 34 pages. And very often master's students say, well, I don't have a table of contents. It's just, I just write one thing. We do need a table of contents. It's required. So even if you haven't structured your manuscript into sections find something to list as the first. And then also what's required is to make sure that your bibliography or works cited is indicated there as well. Here's an example of a more detailed table of contents where somebody has decided to structure into parts and they're putting all of their subheadings there. Again, this is the sort of design choice that you can make. Like if you have an inner book designer, you can go crazy. If you really don't care, as long as what we're concerned about is that the information is accurate, that, the title for your chapter 2 is there and that the page number is correct. That's what we want to know. So there's also, I get questions sometimes for students doing capstone projects, how to structure that. So especially if you're doing a textual capstone where you have a white paper and then you have something else, maybe it's a short story or poetry or images or something. We do prefer it to be a single PDF. And so if you do have a white paper, you can see this is an example of a table of contents where they've structured it with a 2-part organization to the manuscript. And they actually just use 2 sets of numbering. That's fine as well. So I mentioned that these dissertations, theses, and capstones are pretending to be books. So as if it were a book, we have a table of contents. We also have a list of tables. We have lists of figures. We may have lists of appendices if you have several appendices. There are all sorts of preliminary pages that you can add to aid your reader in navigating the text. So sometimes, depending on your field, you might have abbreviations. You can include them. You might have a glossary. You might have a note on transliteration, editorial method, whatever you want to include in the front. You might have a very nice, separate dedication page instead of just the acknowledgments. You can play around and, as I said, just have a look at some books. If you're interested in making this a really nice piece, it's not required, but you can add a lot of different pages. This here is required if you have any tables, if you have any figures. It is like a contents list, but for the tables and figures. And the reason we have it is so that you can move the tables and figures around, and they're referred to by number. You can find them, right? They can be inserted into the text or grouped together at the end. Images, tables, figures. I always say this is not intended to be a degree in desktop publishing. As I said, some people really get into the designing part. Some people just, it's not, Microsoft Word does not make it easy to integrate a lot of non-textual elements. So that's fine if you want to just group your tables all together at the end, but just make sure that they all are numbered, captioned, and include any source information, especially if it's reproduced from another publication or citing the data or whatever kinds of notes are common in your field. They can be color or black and white. And in general, for images, unless it's absolutely necessary, I do recommend just checking that you use sort of more I put low resolution, but really more medium resolution images. Occasionally, somebody's including pictures of their field work, which maybe is just a focus, a classroom, right? Pictures in a classroom just to show the layout of something. And our cameras these days take such large file pictures that it really weighs down their Word document and gives a lot of trouble navigating the text. So I do recommend, if, unless you need a really beautiful resolution, just a general print resolution will work. For image citations, I have 2 examples here. Image citations are doing a lot. So the caption should have several elements, but just to go over briefly, if you are reproducing something from a book or another publication, you should include the bibliographic citation to that publication. That includes a website. So if you're including something from a website, you would put that there. So that would be the source of the image, right? Where you obtained the actual picture. It didn't just arrive. Then you also are citing sort of what's in the image. So you might have the creator, you might have to explain what's happening in the figure and cite a source. If you yourself took the photo, then you're the source and you credit yourself. So I have a couple of examples here, which I think I zoomed in here. This one, it's probably a little blurry for you, but you can see what's happening. This is somebody's from that last page. You see the picture, there's a figure number, there's a citation of the artwork. And then here you see that the photo of the artwork came from this book, this publication. So there's that bibliographic citation. You have the choice to include a full bibliographic citation or use a footnote or a parenthetical. If you use a footnote or parenthetical, it should appear in your full list of references at the end. So sometimes it's easier to just put the full thing in the caption and it doesn't clutter up your full bibliography. Here's another example from that same page where the student did take the photo themselves. And so this is a picture in a gallery, museum, with information about the artwork, and then this source citation, M. Riddler, that's the author of the dissertation. So you can cite yourself that way, or you can say photo by author, or whatever it is. The idea is to be looking ahead to someone who's not you, not your committee, right? It doesn't know anything about you. And they may want to cite or reproduce that image even, right? So you want to give as much information as you can, and so that they would know the copyright and such. Figure captions can vary. You know, this was an art history one that I was just showing, but again, in the sciences, they're very different. Follow whatever is common in your discipline and your publishing styles. For the sciences, which tend to have very lengthy figures, do try to keep the caption on the same page if possible. I know sometimes that's not possible, but it's better. Here's a closer up version. So again, it can be whatever is common in your field. A note about landscape pages, they are allowed. So if you're not able to fit everything in a portrait orientation and you want to turn it, that's fine. But it requires a lot of fiddling with the page numbers. So you see here on the left that 45 has been moved from the bottom. When you create a landscape page in Microsoft Word, it will place, if your page numbers are normally in the footer and you turn the page sideways, essentially, it will place the page number down in the middle. Because this document that you're preparing may be printed and may be bound, you know, by yourself or printed by someone else, we do need to move that page number so that it falls right here. The on-screen view is to see it over in the left margin. And that's because when you print out the page, you're actually going to turn the page. And so the binding of the book would be right along the top, right? So it's a little confusing. Don't do it if you don't have to, because it's a lot of work in terms of editing the page numbers. I can help you with it. We have instructions on the website. So capstone projects are frequently, you know, I kept talking about just a PDF. When you're working on a capstone project, you often have multiple files. If that capstone project happens to be a digital project, there might be multiple files. There might be a website. There might be a code repository. There might be, you know, image files and all of this. So we can accept all of those different formats. We have detailed information about capstone deposits on the website. Usually, if you're doing a digital project, that does require a more individual consultation. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but you know, you should make an appointment with the library, with myself, or with the digital scholarship librarian to go over what's required for submitting. Here's an example of one of the extra pages that digital projects will require. It's called a digital manifest. And this is, again, just showing everything that this person would have submitted for their project, not just the PDF, but also these web archive files from 3 different websites, and then you know, a GitHub repo gets submitted. There's lots of information there. Briefly, I keep saying briefly, nothing's brief. This copyright information, I'm going to go through very lightly, simply because I wanted to give a shout that next week we'll be having another workshop at the same time, Thursday at 4 o'clock. That's just about copyright and fair use. I will record it as well. So if you do have questions, that also tends to be an individual consultation, but I'll give the overview here, which is that, as I said, you retain the copyright to the dissertation or thesis. When you submit, what you're doing is assigning what's called a non-exclusive license to distribute. And it is non-exclusive because you can give that license to lots of people, right? It's not only the university that can distribute it. It's not only ProQuest that can distribute it. You can post it on your website. You can do something else with it. And then the license to distribute means that, yes, you're allowing us to make it available. You will be asked when you submit to ProQuest, so this is only for doctoral students, you will be asked whether you want ProQuest to register your copyright. Under US copyright law, registration is not required. However, it's an optional step you can take if you want to have additional protections. The advantage only really comes into play when you're, if you end up suing someone for copyright infringement. So if you feel that someone has infringed your copyright and you want to take them to court, having registered your copyright at the time of, you know, creation here is useful. And so I can share a link as well with more information about that. But if that's not a concern for you, you do hold the copyright to the work. Registration is $75. It is an optional service that ProQuest is offering. The library does not require proof of any permission that you've obtained, but that doesn't mean that you don't need proof. It's not an ideal thing that you want to hear, I'm sure, but we're not going to block your deposit because you haven't submitted permission, because we understand there are many, many circumstances where you have a right to fair use. Probably most of the uses that are happening in a dissertation or thesis as a scholarly work, most of those are probably going to fall under fair use, but the beauty and curse of fair use is that it's very flexible and it's very kind of squishy. So there's not a clear outline about this much material or under this condition, you're absolutely fine. In fact, if you can claim fair use and someone else can still take you to court and you would have to argue your case in front of the judge. The only person who actually determines whether a use is fair is a judge in a court. So there's nothing to stop people from doing frivolous lawsuits and such. So that's just something for you to be aware of. We don't require proof of permission. We understand that people can have a right to fair use, but it's something that you should evaluate carefully as you're reproducing others' material in your work. Finally, reproducing your own work. So many of you at this point have perhaps published articles in journals, book chapters and such. You might be reusing them in your dissertation. Or even in your thesis, you might be reproducing portions of an article you wrote somewhere. You should, or you're obligated to check with your publication agreement with that journal or with the book publisher to see what you agreed to when you published. Did you actually retain the copyright to your work? Because very often when you publish, you transfer the copyright to someone else. So if you did retain the copyright, that's great. You don't need to request permission. You're free to reuse the material because you have the copyright. But when you publish, you also sign a contract, right? And that may specify other terms that are not related to permission. So it may say that author agrees to, include this citation and do this wherever they share the work, right? So you want to make sure that you are aware of your responsibilities. And I understand too that many of you maybe weren't the corresponding author, maybe it was your advisor. It's just another thing to look at when you're getting ready to deposit. If you don't have the copyright to the work, you might have to get permission. We actually have a really great website that we link to from MIT Libraries that goes to most of the publishers, so you can find out this information pretty easily. Okay, now that was the conclusion of the format. So the rest of the process is that you will upload the final approved PDF, asterisk meaning that there's lots of other files you might be submitting, but the general idea is you're uploading your final document. To do that, you'll go to the library's dissertation office website. There's a menu item that says submit, and you'll find links to both places here. You click on these links. You will create an author account using any email address. This is really designed to mirror submitting for a publication. So you will have to create a new account. The reason you create an account is so we can go back and forth in the system. And you can check the status of your submission because you have an account. So you'll create the account, fill out an online submission form. You see that here. This is the CUNY Academic Works form. You'll just fill in the title, author, abstract, keywords, whatever else about your submission. And then at the bottom, you navigate and attach your file. That notifies the library that there's a new submission. We'll go in and check all of your information. And if there are corrections, you'll be notified. More about that in a second. Sorry. Hold on. I didn't mean to click the link. Okay, sorry about that. During the submission, you'll be asked whether you'd like to place an embargo.
or to select an embargo. An embargo is delaying the release of the full text. I would say about, at the last time I checked, it was almost evenly split. Maybe 45% of students were embargoing the dissertation. And what that, again, means is that the information about your dissertation will be included in our online database. But when someone goes to click to view the full text, it will say, this item won't be available until this date. So it is a delay in the release of the full text to the public, because researchers through the Graduate Center will still be able to access the dissertation. It means that they need to place an interlibrary loan request. They need to have institutional credentials. It restricts the audience to a more scholarly group. People really have to want to see the full text instead of just being curious and stumbling on it. You have a choice of up to 2 years, so 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. And it is renewable upon request. You can have unlimited renewals. People contact me every 2 years to renew the embargo. The important thing to know is that this is, some schools have very strict rules about the embargo, like they won't offer an embargo unless your advisor fills out some reason why you need to have an embargo. Other schools allow stricter embargoes, mostly because there's technology, there's a patent pending, and there's rules around that. This is the Graduate Center's policy. Again, people can select an embargo for lots of different reasons. It really depends on your discipline, your field, where you're at in your career, and also your kind of career goals. So in fields where the dissertation really gets reworked into a first book, it's fairly common to embargo the dissertation until you've had a chance to work that into a more formal publication. In other fields, it's not a concern. I will say that most of the uses that we see at the library for dissertations, they're usually other doctoral students who are looking for examples of dissertations, or people who are lower than a PhD level. So it's not so much that we have high-level researchers going after them, but they are a really high quality sort of information for the public. So we see, clinic practitioners and high school teachers, and lots of people kind of give us feedback of, this was so great that I could have free access to this study. So, as you're thinking about how you want to provide access to your dissertation, I just wanted to frame it in that sense. And usually I just want to say, talk to a trusted advisor. Also, you can change it at any time. So if you're not sure what to do and you don't want to think about it right now, that's fine. Just, maybe put a 6-month one and come back to it. You would need a department approval. We talked about doing that. So you've formatted your work, you've submitted it to the library, you're waiting to hear back, or maybe, as I said, it could happen in either order. You need to have some arrangement to get an approval to the library so that we know that your dissertation or thesis or capstone has been read, is approved, is final. Doctoral students have already defended, and there's a separate process for paperwork related to the defense. That is not about the library deposit. The library deposit and library approval is really about the manuscript, and that any sort of minor revisions, they know that you're ready. They've looked at it. So that can be an email sent from the EO or sent by the APO, copying the EO, or, I'm somewhat flexible during these times, but I do need some kind of record of verification from the program that you're ready to deposit. So I'll also say that some programs have begun requiring those approval pages to come back with scanned signatures. I believe biology, chemistry, mostly in the sciences. So check in with your program office to see what's required. What happens next is that the library will look at your submission, see if there's any format corrections. We'll Please allow 2 to 3 business days for format inspection. So if you submit on December 9th, which is a Thursday night, that means that, come next week, Tuesday or so, you would receive a notice. If there are corrections, it's a bullet list of what to change. You would then go into your local file, make a new version with those corrections, save it as a new PDF. And now that you have an account, you can go log into your submission and find your submission and attach a new file. And we can do that as many times as needed. If there are no corrections, you'll get one last look to confirm. And once the deposit is accepted and done, then there's no changes. So do make sure you've done a final proofread. Your deposit date is recorded in your transcript, and it is considered the date you stop being a graduate student. It's the day you complete the degree. So that can have implications for international students. It can have implications for all sorts of reasons. People are often requiring proof that they finished the degree for a job or some other application. The registrar can produce a letter of completion. So if someone deposited December 9th and they needed to show proof, they would email the registrar. The degree is not on your transcript until the degree date.
Everything I've gone over is on the library website. And again, you can email me if you have any questions. You can also visit the dissertation office on the library's second floor, or you can set up an individual consultation if you need assistance as you make your way through the deposit process.